This will sound very strange, but the release of the album Joshua Tree by the rock band U2 and their performance exactly 777 weeks later at the halftime show of the Super Bowl in 2002, just months after 9/11, in which Tom Brady and the Patriots won their first Super Bowl, and the 7.0 magnitude earthquake in Joshua Tree, California in 1999, and the 7 trumpets that Joshua and the Israelites blew before the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment in the book of Joshua in the Bible, and President Trump's famous descent down the golden escalator in the Trump Tower in 2015, and Trump's election win by 77 electoral votes, and his inauguration when he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, 77 days before he launched missiles into Syria, is a prophecy from the Christian God of the Bible that is predicting that President Trump will die from a heart attack on May 9th, 2024, exactly 370 weeks, which hints at 3 sets of 7 after he launched the missiles into Syria on his 77th day in office. And this is a prophecy that is predicting that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 3rd, 2024. As well, the day that Trump's wall of security at his Mar-a-Lago estate was breached by the FBI, on the same day of prophetic flooding that closed the entrances of Joshua Tree National Park, is also part of a prophecy that is communicating that America's walls of security are collapsing and is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, as the president again, after it is predicted that Michelle Obama will become the president on February 20th, 2024, which will be after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, in this video, I will explain this amazing diagram of God's big picture of signs, a portion of it, that is truly profound, and it will be making, through this theme of Joshua symbolism, the book of Joshua in the Bible, which begins with this date for the Joshua Tree album of the very famous band U2, and how all of this is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on October 17th, 2023. The reason she will die in a plane crash is so that the Antichrist, Barack Obama, can become the president again. And it will also be demonstrated how all of this is predicting the date that President Trump, God's trumpet, will die on November 7th, 2023. All right, this video was originally recorded prior to October 17th. It turned out that October 17th was yet another step in the trail of signs that is leading to the date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And the prophetic signs on October 17th that occurred on October 17th revealed and confirmed this 3 sets of 7 days. And so in other words, all of the analysis that you see in this diagram is 100% correct. It was just that the trail is not finished. And if you are skeptical of that, fair enough. But when the prediction comes to pass that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, it will mean that what I have just said is correct. And that is that all of the analysis in this diagram is 100% correct. All right, I know that it is because I know the relevant signs that occurred on October 17th confirmed all of the analysis. But you don't know that. You don't, you'll have to take my word for that. But anyway, one of the signs included Kamala Harris and her Air Force Two plane. Okay, so anyway, these signs, by the way, that occurred on October 17th are explained in the must-watch Gaza explosion video. This video explains some of the amazing and important prophetic signs that the righteous Christian God of the Bible used to point to October 17th, 2023, regarding the prediction that U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Here is the email and forensic notes document that indicate that the prediction for Harris's plane crash on October 17th, 2023 was known since July 6th, 2023. In fact, it has been known since October of 2020 that Harris will die in a plane crash so that Barack Obama can become the president again. God pointed to October 17th, ahead of October 17th, and so it was believed that Harris's predicted plane crash would be on October 17th. As explained in the Gaza explosion video, the extremely profound prophetic signs that occurred on October 17th, 10:17, revealed adding 3 sets of 7 days to reach November 7th, 11:7. The signs on 11:7 in turn revealed a trail of signs that continued on through other dates, and this trail of signs is predicted to ultimately end on February 2nd or 3rd, 2024. This trail of signs that I am referring to is explained in the must-watch Gaza explosion video. That said, October 17th was the bigger date. October 17th was supremely important, and the signs on 10:17 pointed to Zechariah chapter 1, verse 17 in the Bible. The Gaza explosion video explains how the signs on 10:17 pointed to Zechariah 1:17. Zechariah 1:17 was also hinted at with the date 11:7, which again was a prophetic 3 sets of 7 days after 10:17. Furthermore, from 11:7, the trail of signs regarding Harris's predicted plane crash continued on to the date 1:7, and this too was another hint at Zechariah 1:17. The reason why God used October 17th, the date 10:17, to point to Zechariah 1:17 is that this important prophecy in Zechariah chapter 1 in the Bible is dated. And the date of this prophecy is recorded in Zechariah chapter 1 verse 7, 1:7. And the date 10:17 also hints at this. The prophet Zechariah recorded the precise date on which he received the prophecy from God. The date was the 24th day of the month of Shevat in the Hebrew calendar. This year in 2024, the 24th day of Shevat begins at sunset on February 2nd and goes to sunset February 3rd. In other words, God used many different profound trails of signs to lead to October 17th, 2023, in order to reveal the date on which Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, the 24th day of the month of Shevat, which is February 2nd or 3rd, 2024. All right, now, God is also pointing to November 7th in his trails of signs with Trump symbolism, and specifically related to the end of Trump, the last Trump, a phrase that the Apostle Paul used in the Bible. The death of President Trump will be a symbolic last Trump sign. trump in archaic English means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet. Like I was saying, this is 3 sets of 7 days apart, and the signs on October 17th confirmed adding 3 sets of 7. The reason for 3 sets of 7 and why this is extremely relevant regarding Trump is that the Israelites, before the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment, they enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 and then blew trumpets. And then the walls of security collapsed. They marched around once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was in fact a 7 followed by a 7 times 7. All right, this video is now being recorded after November 7th. It was known prior to November 7th that it would be only a step in the trail of signs and not the day that President Trump would die. More analysis, more light, more revelation came regarding God's big picture of signs. Anyway, the date it is now predicted that President Trump will die from a heart attack is May 9th, 2024, exactly 370 weeks after this date, Trump's 77th day in office, when he launched missiles into Syria. And that's relevant too, because in God's signs, Trump is God's King Cyrus, who is described in the 45th chapter, hence why Trump is the 45th president. King Cyrus is depicted in ancient art as being a man with a particular type of hat, which is what Trump's hair also symbolizes, believe it or not. Well, anyway, the ancient Persians, which King Cyrus was, the leader of the Persians, were known for their archery, and that in modern day, in God's signs, is symbolized by Iran's penchant for creating new missiles and their missile technology. The Iranians are constantly creating new missiles, and this is just symbolism for the ancient Persians and their success. The key to their success was their innovation regarding archery. Okay, so anyway, 370 weeks exactly hints at 3 sets of 7. As I will also explain, 73 weeks, 73 days, and this trail of signs here is the same thing. So it is astounding beyond words. I'm just getting this out of the way to explain November 7th. I'm getting this out of the way at the beginning of this video. But keep in mind that this date here, April 7th, 2017, 77 days into Trump's presidency, is exactly 370 weeks, which hints at 3 sets of 7 to the day that President Trump will die, which will be the last Trump sign. And before the walls of security collapsed on Jericho, the Israelites blew the trumpets, one long last trumpet blast. This is the reason why Trump's name is Trump. In archaic English, the word Trump means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet. All right, and one more thing too. The signs on November 7th were Trump signs. They were Joshua symbolism signs, and this is the symbolism in Trump, as I have explained. One of the signs, for example, a prophetic sign, which was the super fog event, the second one actually, which gives us a second witness, because there was another prophetic super fog event in God's signs in October. And this particular super fog event was also in Louisiana, but anyway, which by the way hints at St. Louis, but that's another story explained in the Gaza hospital explosion video. But the death in the super fog event, which caused the car pileup, was on the I-10 highway, and God uses the I-10 to hint at 110, which is the age at which Joshua died. So anyway, also on this day, the leader of Israel, symbolic for the leader of the Israelites, Joshua, announced, trumpeted in other words, that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, had encircled Gaza City, symbolism for encircling the city of Jericho by the Israelites, And we're now, for the first time, deep inside Gaza City, which symbolizes the walls of security of Jericho collapsing and the Israelites taking the city of Jericho. So that was, in other words, November 7th was correct. The analysis you are seeing in this diagram is correct. It was just a step in the trail of signs. So now that we've got that out of the way, enjoy the rest of this most amazing video explaining this truly profound diagram that you were looking at. All right, so let's begin with some basics here, which is that in the book of Joshua, the Israelites marched after they crossed into the promised land. In order to take the promised land, they took the city of Jericho, and when they did so, they marched around the walls of security of Jericho in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls of security once per day for 7 days. And then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was a symbolic 3 sets of 7. And what I'm going to do right now is just play, well, let's see. Why don't we hold off on the clip that I'm going to play for a minute and just get into this trail of signs on the bottom row here. So given the 3 sets of 7 in the book of Joshua and the walls of security collapsing in God's judgment, which is what God is communicating symbolically for America, its walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. This is what is communicated in his signs. Hence the connections here with symbolic 3 sets of 7 and Joshua. Hence this day, which was March 16th, 1987. And it was the release of the first song on their album named Joshua Tree. One of their biggest selling albums, one of their most famous albums of U2, the rock band. And on the cover of the album is a picture of Joshua Tree National Park and Joshua trees in Joshua Tree National Park. But also, very importantly, and I know this because when I was a kid or a young teenager, I was a U2 fan, and this album is about America. Furthermore, also their follow-up album is as well, which was really produced while they were on the road touring for the Joshua Tree. The follow-up album, Rattle and Hum. These 2 albums are about America. And that's very prophetically symbolic, given that God is using this in his signs for judgment warning of America's walls of security collapsing and the destruction of the nation of America. So I'll just repeat that. The album Joshua Tree is about America. Furthermore, there are spiritual lyrics in the album that allude to the God of the Bible. If you pay attention to the lyrics of, for example, the song, which was the second song from the album, Where the Streets Have No Name. And that's definitely about heaven. And, well, anyway, there was also, that was the third song. The second song was, I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. So I think that there are, and many would agree, that there are heavy spiritual lyrics in this album. But the first of the songs that was released, and there was also the hit In God's Country, for that matter, which I believe was the 4th song released from the album. In God's Country was a hit. It was the 4th of the hits. And that was obviously definitely about God's country, America, because there have only been 2 nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God, Israel and America. No other nation is like that. Other nations have been founded on ethnicity or language or geography, But America, with the Pilgrims, was founded on a spiritual relationship with God, and the Pilgrims, in fact, saw their crossing of the Atlantic as analogous to the Israelites' crossing of the desert and the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Furthermore, it was Joshua who led the Israelites into the Promised Land. This is the name where we get the name Joshua from, and for which the park Joshua Tree is named after. Well, I don't know that for sure, actually. I don't know how the park got its name, but that is the name Joshua. Joshua led the Israelites into the Promised Land. Now, one thing that I just learned, I'm actually editing this video long after I originally first produced it. One thing that I just learned, or just realized, is that the first song of the album, not the first one released, but the first song in chronological order there, in the order of the songs on the album, is Where the Streets Have No Name. And the first verse, the first lyric, the first sentence of that song is, I want to run, I want to hide, I want to tear down the walls that hold me inside. So right in the very beginning of this album, Joshua Tree, we have this lyric mentioning a tearing down of walls. And again, it is Joshua who led the Israelites around the walls of security of the ancient city of Jericho after they crossed into the Promised Land in a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. The walls were torn down. And that's the first lyric of this song. And when reading about how Bono was inspired to write this song, it's not mentioned anywhere that he was inspired by the God of the Bible. There's a story behind what inspired him to write the lyrics. It goes something like living in Ireland, where people are known by the street they live on based on their income and their religious status, etc. And so anyway, the point is that this album God is using as a prophetic sign. Its name is the Joshua Tree, and the first lyric of the first song, Where the Streets Have No Name, mentions tearing down walls. What are the odds of that? That is stunning confirmation that this is a prophetic sign from God, a sign that is communicating the walls of security collapsing in God's judgment on God's country, America. Also, the music video for this song won a Grammy Award for Best Music Video Performance. And the video and the band had their video made on top in Los Angeles, on top of a one-story building in a rough neighborhood of Los Angeles. And a crowd gathered and they sang and performed on top of the building. And as the video shows, the police arrive and they're not happy about the disruption on the street. Thousands of people are starting to come, etc. And they get shut down. But it is quite appropriate that the song, the video was filmed in Los Angeles, which is Spanish for the angels, and the song is named Where the Streets Have No Name. But what is very interesting too is that it could have been anywhere, and they didn't do this by design, because I'm sure they don't know what I'm talking about here. But the street corner that this famous video was made on was 7th Street and Main. It was on 7th Street. And Joshua is all about the symbolic 3 sets of 7. In the book of Joshua, the Israelites marched around the walls of Jericho 7 times, once per day, for 7 days. And then on the 7th day, they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. And furthermore, you could make the case that the song is even itself an allusion to trumpets. Not that there are any trumpets in the song, though. But in any case, there, at the end of them blowing trumpets in Joshua, they shouted. And then the walls of security collapsed. Well, Bono is known for having an amazing voice and like yelling, but singing, but yelling very powerfully with his voice. If you even physically, he's got the physical body to be able to do this powerful voice that he has, and so he is shouting symbolically. In other words, him yelling his typical way of singing with the where the streets have no name, which is it's a shouting. And he was shouting on 7th Street. And in the book of Joshua, they shouted after they blew 7 trumpets. So I think you get the idea here. This is a really profound confirmation that the album, The Joshua Tree, is a prophetic sign from God, communicating the walls of security collapsing on America. So the point here is that this is symbolism for America. The Joshua Tree album, and the first song was released on this date, and the song is titled With or Without You. And when we understand this from God's perspective in his prophetic signs, it isn't a love song. And what I mean by that is it's not in his signs. What it is referring to here in his signs is God going on with or without America. That's what it is communicating. And to prove that, first of all, the prediction will prove everything that I'm saying in this video is true. And this is the purpose of this prediction that is from God. Make no mistake. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove the things that I am saying. And to not appreciate that is to miss entirely the point of this prediction that is from God, and the point of this video and video channel. And I like to say you might as well turn off the video now if you refuse to appreciate that this is the case. Believe me, I know far more than you why God has given me a voice through this prediction. And it is to prove these things, including that America has been God's Gentile nation that he has had his hand on throughout history, all right, throughout its history. Now, to prove this also, besides the prediction, we have this exact 777 weeks connection, which is obviously a 3 sets of 7, symbolically, to this very, very important prophetic sign, extremely important prophetic sign, which was Super Bowl 36, in which U2 played the halftime show. And as we know, Super Bowls are known for their halftime shows. In fact, some would say it draws more attention than the actual game, the halftime show. All right, now U2 played this halftime show, and it is exactly 777 weeks, which is 3 sets of 7, after the release of the Joshua Tree album. And in the book of Joshua, there is a 3 sets of 7. And the 3 sets of 7 comes when the Israelites enacted this 3 sets of 7 and then shouted, and then the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. Well, 3 sets of 7, which is 777 weeks after the release of this album, that again, by the way, once again, I'll remind you, begins with the first lyric mentioning walls being torn down, is this Super Bowl halftime show and their performance, their very famous performance because of this being their Super Bowl that they performed at, but also because it was the Super Bowl after 9/11, which I'll explain in just a second. When Bono got on stage and they played, including the song Where the Streets Have No Name, Bono shouted. Bono, again, is known for his very powerful, tremendous voice in which he can shout the lyrics. And that's exactly a parallel with the Bible. After the 3 sets of 7, the Israelites shouted, and then the walls of security collapsed, which is exactly why Bono shouted in the Super Bowl in front of the whole nation right after 9/11, which was the big judgment warning for America that its walls of security are about to collapse in God's judgment. In my opinion, it's also possible to see that we have symbolism for a circuit in a Super Bowl arena, because an arena is a 360-degree venue. When you play in the center of an arena, you're playing to people in front of you, behind you, and on both sides of you, right? And so, in other words, it's a parallel also with the book of Joshua in that the Israelites marched around in a circle, in a circuit, around the walls of security of Jericho. This is the same kind of symbolism we have in an arena venue, where the band U2 is playing in the middle of it, surrounded, if you will, by a giant wall of people. So anyway, you get the idea here. There's symbolism in that too. So U2 played the halftime show at this particular Super Bowl, but what is with this Super Bowl? It was the Super Bowl just months after 9/11, which was the big judgment warning for America. It pointed to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 10 through 11. The events of 9/11 pointed to Isaiah 9:11 and 10 through 11, which was from the Bible, the warning from God on the ancient Israel with the raid of the Assyrians into the northern kingdom of Israel, which is why the North Tower was struck first, and the terrorists on 9/11 came from the same part of the world, and on, the parallels. But so it is amazing that we have this connection from the Joshua Tree album, as in the book of Joshua, with its 3 sets of 7 in it, that story. We have this exact 777 weeks to the day that U2 played this prophetic football game, like I am saying, pointed back to 9/11 and the judgment warning, because this came shortly after. And the Patriots were playing in this game, and they were the underdog. This was the first year of their dynasty, led by the new quarterback, Tom Brady, who ended up becoming the GOAT, greatest of all time, which is Antichrist symbolism. And on that note, this was Super Bowl 36, and God uses the number 36 to hint at 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And the reason for that is that 36 hints at 3 sixes, but it is also 6 times 6, and 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, all the way up to 36 equals 666. And so this Super Bowl, in other words, was a warning of the Antichrist. Furthermore, the number 17 is symbolic of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. For example, in the book of Revelation, the Antichrist is described with a metaphor of a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. And the Antichrist will be defeated at the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ on October 12th, 2024, on the Day of Atonement, which is the 10th day of the 7th month, for which the number 17 also symbolizes. The 7 heads and 10 horns also symbolize the number 17, or 17 symbolizes this. So anyway, in this Super Bowl, and by the way, again, the prediction will prove that the second coming is on October 12th, 2024. Case closed, end of debate. No more discussion about Daniel's 70th 7 for those that know what I'm talking about. It began symbolically in 2017. Case closed, end of debate, when the prediction comes to pass. No more talking about speculation about it. We are already well inside the final 70th 7. Case closed. Okay, so this Super Bowl The reason why it points back to 9/11 is that this Super Bowl is known for the final minute game-winning drive of Tom Brady and the Patriots, which began on their 17-yard line with exactly 1 minute and 30 seconds left in the game, and with the score tied at 17-17. And the very famous sportscaster John Madden, during the beginning of the drive, questioned the wisdom of doing their drive, that he felt that it would be better to just go into overtime instead of letting it all hang out. But then later he changed his mind after their success. And he said, you know what, I kind of like what they're doing. And, sometimes you just got to let it all hang out. And they did. And they ended up winning in the last minute there with a field goal. Tom Brady got them into field goal range, and they kicked the field goal as time ran out. So the game was, again, tied at 17-17, and the last minute drive began at the 17-yard line. Well, all of this was to point to the 17 minutes in between when the two planes struck the two towers just a couple of months earlier. Okay? And that is why we have this exact 17 years connection to this Super Bowl, in which Tom Brady went into the Super Bowl with 17 Super Bowl records, and having been in 9 out of the 11 Super Bowls that the Patriots had been in, which of course hinted at 9/11 and confirms everything that I just said about this Super Bowl pointing to 9/11. Oh, and yes, the Patriots, because, and at that time, everyone in America just about was a Patriots fan because of what had just happened on 9/11. The symbolism was quite clear for everyone. Even if they didn't believe in God, they were still enjoying the coincidence of the Patriots being in the Super Bowl. But also the reason why the New England Patriots are God's number one sports team in his prophetic signs, or at least when Tom Brady was playing for them. And so I don't even need to qualify it. They are the most important team in God's signs, sports team, because the New England Patriots symbolize also the spiritual founding of America with the Pilgrims in New England. Okay? And God is pointing to that relationship that began with the Pilgrims and how it is, over the years, there has been a departure from that. And now the cup of iniquity is overflowing, as the metaphor is in the Bible, which is when the destruction of the people comes. So that's why the Patriots, and then we have this last Super Bowl that Tom Brady played in with the Patriots. 17. It was actually exactly 17 years later, and furthermore, the date 2-3 hints at the Antichrist, because the basketball president wore jersey 23 when he played basketball in high school. All right, and 2-3 hints at that, and there are many reasons for confirming that. This Super Bowl was billed as the goat versus the ram because they played the Rams, and they also played the Rams in this Super Bowl. And these were the Los Angeles Rams, and this is because on 9/11, the flights from New England were a flight that crashed into the Twin Towers, were on their way to Los Angeles. In fact, they rammed the towers. That's why the Rams and Los Angeles, 17 years apart. Well, anyway, it was the GOAT versus Rams Super Bowl because Tom Brady is the GOAT. He was at that time. 17 years later, he was the GOAT. And he played for 23 seasons. So he retired. If this was this would have been the 18th year, I suppose, because it was 17 years apart. So it was the 18th year. So he ended up playing another 5 years. Yes, I suppose that's correct. Well, anyway, the point is that there are confirmations, including the fact that it was a GOAT versus Rams Super Bowl, confirmations of the number 23, because in Bible prophecy, a period of 2,300 days is in context of the Antichrist, regarding the Antichrist. And this Super Bowl on the date 2-3 was exactly 2,300 days after the 23rd anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake in the San Francisco Bay Area. And on the 23rd anniversary, there was a huge fireball that flew at low altitude over the San Francisco Bay Area and was a national news story. All right. So anyway, there's a lot of confirmations for the 23. But anyways, it's exactly 17 years, which is also amazing too. Well, also, the Super Bowls are known for their commercials, and this Super Bowl was known, one commercial was the big Amazon commercial starring Harrison Ford as himself. And God is using Harrison Ford for a few reasons, in particular, his aviation hobby, his roles as a pilot in his movies, and coincidentally, he is known for being an aviation enthusiast. He narrated the IMAX documentary Age of Airplanes. He is a spokesperson for the aviation community. And he's also known for his aviation mishaps, which is pointing to the aviation mishap of Kamala Harris, hence Harrison Ford. All right, but the commercial involved a blackout worldwide, and this is a hint at the coming, and it was seen from space by the astronauts in the commercial. And this is hinting at the coming catastrophic solar storm that will knock out the nation's power grid, predicted to be on February 22nd, 2024. And but also the reason why Harrison Ford and his two names, Harrison and Ford, is that these are two names of former presidents. And Harrison, Benjamin Harrison, was the 23rd president. That's why we have the date 23 here with the Harrison Ford commercial, which hints at 23. But also this date was exactly 23 weeks before Harrison Ford's birthday and the blackout in Manhattan, the famous Manhattan blackout that occurred coincidentally during Manhattanhenge, which occurs twice a year when the sun sets perfectly in between the skyscrapers of the canyons of Manhattan, which of course was designed by God and was pointing to the sun and what I just described, the coming blackout caused by the sun. And so, and then 23 weeks after that was the double doink by the kicker Harrison Butker. But that's more of another story. And it was from the 23-yard line, actually. 23 yard with the score at 23. And that's hinting at the double doink of the president who wore jersey 23, the basketball president, Barack Obama, who wore 23 in high school. Harrison Butker's double doink in the game there, and which was exactly 50 weeks after the double doink in the playoffs with the Bears, and Obama's from Chicago. And anyway, so that just goes on and on. But to get back on track here, the double doink presidency will be the result of the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and he will serve non-consecutive terms, just like Grover Cleveland, who skipped the 23rd presidency of Benjamin Harrison. All right. And so, by the way, the double doink that was 23 from the 23-yard line that scored 23 was exactly 50 weeks, which is prophetic, hints at the church. But anyway, I won't go there. But after the other double doink that was kicked with 9 seconds left in the game, which is the pairing of 9 and 23, and the only grandfather-grandson presidents were the 9th and 23rd presidents. The other one, the 9th president, William Harrison, Benjamin Harrison's grandfather, died exactly 1 month after being in office, which hints at how Kamala Harris will die while in office. Kamala Harris. All right, now the reason why Ford is because the only president to never have been elected vice president or president and was appointed instead was Gerald Ford. And this hints at how Barack Obama will overcome the 22nd Amendment, which restricts someone from being elected more than twice through being appointed instead. And thus he will be able to become the president again. And this is why, on this same day as the Super Bowl, the Harrison Ford commercial, Kamala Harris tweeted her condolences regarding an airplane crash in Los Angeles. And again, the Los Angeles Rams were in the Super Bowl on that day. in the suburb of Los Angeles, or I guess you would call it a suburb, but it's, anyway, it was in Yorba Linda, and which is an enclave of Los Angeles. And well, I think it's a city proper, but anyway, it's Yorba Linda, and that's the home of the presidential library of Richard Nixon, who was the only president to have used the 25th Amendment, which he used to appoint Gerald Ford. And so that's why there was that plane crash on the day. And in the scene of the video, you can see one of the people standing in awe of the burning house with the plane that just crashed into it. Someone's wearing a jersey of the football player that's in the Super Bowl that day, of the quarterback, who was player number 16, by the way. And that hints at 4 times 4, the 44th president. And also it was the Super Bowl 53. And 53 is the 16th prime number, which again hints at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. Well, anyway, so we have Brady going in with 17 Super Bowl records, exactly 17 years after the 17-yard line drive with the score 17-17. Following this Super Bowl, we continue on with 17 days, which is amazing because that hints at what? The two towers, the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. That's why symbolically 2 17s here. In other words, this Super Bowl pointed back to 9/11. Again, Brady had been in 9 out of 11 Patriots Super Bowls at this point. And we continue on from this Super Bowl that points back to 9/11 and the plane crashes on 9/11 to this plane crash that will change history when it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on the 17th of the month on 10/17. God uses combinations of 1s and 7s. You need to watch the foundational video on this channel. I put a lot of effort into the visuals, the visual aids and stuff, but it's very, very important. It's an explanation for the reason why the number 117 is so very important, and that's why I won't explain it here, because there's no point in explaining it all again. It's not a very long video. Anyway, it's titled Harris Crash will be on 10/17 equals eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. The eclipse peaked over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m., and that's where she is predicted to crash. Anyway, make sure you find that video and watch that video. In fact, I would even recommend stopping this video here and coming back. All right, this, as I said earlier, this video was recorded originally before October 17th. And what is amazing is that this trail is even simpler than it is here. Although I'm glad I didn't know this, because I wouldn't have created this necessarily. Probably not. This whole diagram might not even exist had I known that the date that it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash will be February 3rd, 2024. But anyway, February 3rd, 2024, the date 2-3 hints at 23, and it will be exactly 2 plus 3 years, which is also the equivalent of 2 times 30 months. Okay, so 2 plus 3 years hints at 23, and 2 times 30 months also hints at 23. Okay, it's exactly 2 plus 3 years after the date 2-3, the date of this Super Bowl. And as I explained earlier, this Super Bowl was all about pairings of 2 and 3, which hinted at 23. And including it was the Goat versus Ram Super Bowl, which hinted at the 2300 days in the Goat versus Ram prophecy in the book of Daniel. And it was 2300 days after the 23rd anniversary of the 1989 World Series earthquake, as I explained earlier. So, in other words, we have an astounding connection. And again, this date was all about, or rather involved, Kamala Harris's airplane, well, her association with this prophetic airplane crash in Yorba Linda. So we have the astounding connection here involving the number 23, 2 plus 3 years, or also 2 times 30 months, to the date it is predicted she will crash on February 3rd, 2024. All right, if you took my advice and you stopped the video and watched the other one and came back, welcome back. All right, so now I was talking earlier about 3 sets of 7 and Trump. The Israelites blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed, and they blew the trumpets in the 3 sets of 7. What I'm going to do now is just play a quick clip explaining a little bit more regarding this connection and also with President Trump, God's trumpet. President Trump is God's trumpet that he uses to highlight and confirm his signs. The word trump in archaic English means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. Donald Trump was born on a Sabbath day, and the portion of Torah that was read in synagogues on the day that Trump was born was the passage from the book of Numbers, in which God commanded the making of trumpets. Trump was born exactly 23 months, which happens to be exactly 700 days, before Israel was reborn. And God used Trump in prophetic signs regarding the restoration of Israel. Donald Trump chose his running mate, Mike Pence, and their two names, Trump-Pence, hints at trumpets. Trump's presidency, including his election campaign, was synonymous with his border wall of security. Before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment on ancient Jericho, the Hebrews blew trumpets. Before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment on the ancient city of Jericho, the Hebrews marched around Jericho's walls of security 7 times over 7 days, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. This was a 3 sets of 7. In the book of Revelation, which describes God's judgment in the end times period, there are also 3 sets of 7 judgments. When the Hebrews blew the trumpets at Jericho, it was an announcement from God of judgment on the city of Jericho. Likewise, President Trump's presidency was an announcement of judgment on the nation of America, God's Gentile nation and the only other nation in history besides Israel that was founded on a relationship with God. This is why President Trump's election campaign and presidency were synonymous with his border wall of security, and why on the first day of his presidency, on Inauguration Day, President Trump was exactly 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, which was 3 sets of 7, and paralleled the 3 sets of 7 in the book of Joshua. Through the symbolic very beginning of Trump's presidency, God announced judgment on the nation. Joshua, the leader of the Hebrews, led them around the walls of security 7 times over 7 days, while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. On the day that President Trump was elected by 77 electoral votes, the leader of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had been in power for exactly 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. Okay, so now from the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, we have 3 sets of 7 days to the date it is predicted that Trump, God's trumpet, will die on November 7th, which also again hints at 117. Both of these dates do. Both of these predicted dates of these deaths. So again, make sure you watch the video all about the number 117. Okay, so there's your 3 sets of 7 there. And in this diagram, we begin with from Joshua tree, and Trump is known. He even visited his wall of security on the same day that Joshua trees were cut down illegally in Joshua Tree National Park due to the government shutdown over a supposed controversy, although who in the right mind could think of that as being a controversy, for funding the border wall of security. The government was shut down, the Democrats being the spirit of Antichrist that they are, did not want to fund a wall of security, and the government shut down in any way. So Trump actually coincidentally visited his wall of security on this day, which was January 10th, 2019. And the date 110, January 10th, hints at 110 the age at which Joshua died in the Bible. So that's Joshua symbolism, and that was also the same day that the Joshua trees were illegally cut down because there was no security at the national park because of the government shutdown over the border wall of security. Okay, so the Joshua Tree album here, the release of the With or Without You song, which hints at God moving on with or without America, because America has departed from God. So we have this exact 151 months to this 7.0, as in the sevens in Joshua, earthquake in Joshua Tree, California. All right. Now, there was the strongest earthquake since then on July 4th, 2019. You may recall the Ridgecrest earthquake. And it was reported by the media at the time that it was the strongest earthquake in 20 years. But what they didn't realize is that it was exactly 20 biblical years. And a biblical prophetic year is 12 months of 30 days each. Furthermore, all of the ancient cultures, and literally all of them, used 360-day calendars until a certain point in history. And I forget when that was. But anyway, that's a biblical prophetic year. And it was exactly 20 years. And that's because 20 years in the Bible is very prophetic and symbolic. It symbolizes a complete period of waiting, God waiting for America to repent. And that's why the earthquake occurred on America's birthday, July 4th, 2019. And the big story, if you recall, was the video, the viral video of the footage of the young kids enacting in their play, the school play, the Transcontinental Railroad, because it was the 150th anniversary year of it, and the Golden Spike ceremony when the two railroads joined together, symbolizing America's hand on God's hand on American history and its manifest destiny and its movement west, etc. But right at the moment when the kids started swinging their hammers down, their big hammers, enacting this, was when the earthquake hit. And then all the kids are screaming, and the camera moves around chaotically, but then focuses briefly on the American flag in the background, which I later learned that that wall from which the flag was hanging collapsed. Okay, and then in the scene, the power goes out, it goes dark. So, and the kids are screaming. It's quite troubling when you know that this is a prophetic sign from God communicating judgment, destruction for America. And so, but anyway, so that was the 20th anniversary, 20 years exactly after that. Okay. So we have this 7.0 earthquake, and that's amazing because it's Joshua Tree, California, and it's 151 months. Now, why is that important? Well, 151 is the 36th prime number. And I explained earlier how the number 36 is symbolic of the Antichrist. Okay. But also, coincidentally, we have a second witness to this. And by the way, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, which is the case if one isn't using second and third witnesses generally, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And so a second witness to this 151 months, which hints at 666 through the number 36, is that it is the equivalent of 1,260% of a year. And in Bible prophecy, 7 times it is mentioned that the period of the Antichrist and the end times is 1,260 days, which is what this hints at. Also, this 151 months hints at 1 plus 5 plus 1 equals 7. And that's why this is another amazing confirmation for this connection, because it connects to the 7.0 magnitude earthquake in Joshua Tree, California, which again connects to the Joshua Tree album. So 151, in fact, hints at the number 7, and it connects to the 7.0 magnitude earthquake. We have another second witness to this, because as explained in other videos, Loretta Fuddy, who died in a plane crash, which is ultimately pointing to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, was the health director of the state of Hawaii, who supposedly officially provided Obama's long-form birth certificate, which was proven to be a forgery. And of course, he was born in Kenya. But anyway, that's why she died. God was using this as a sign to confirm what I just said. And she died exactly 7 years before this health event, and it connects to Obamacare, nationalized health care. The health event I'm referring to is the day that this organization right here officially approved the thing, which is the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, so, but anyway, not to get off subject of this video, I just wanted to give you another second witness to this, because Loretta Fuddy's name in Gematria equals 151. If you don't know what Gematria is, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such, names and words can be converted into a numeric value. And when we do this with Loretta Fuddy's name, we get 151. And that's very relevant because the file number of the forged or forgery birth certificate was file number 151. And as I just explained, 151 hints at 1 plus 5 plus 1 equals 7, and that is a confirmation of this exact 7 years in this particular diagram. Well, also, God uses the number 188 in his signs because the 188th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance is the word woe exclamation mark, used in context of extreme judgment from God. For example, the 9/11 events were exactly 188 years after the only other time that a foreign enemy attacked the nation's capital, when the British landed at Washington's Mount Vernon estate and then proceeded to burn down the White House and the Capitol building before being chased out of Washington, D.C. on the very same day by a hurricane. So that's why we have this extremely prophetic connection here between the 7.0 Joshua Tree earthquake and Trump, the symbolic beginning of Trump's presidency. And furthermore, his trumpeting the border wall of security, because Trump's presidency and his election campaign were synonymous with his border wall of security, which is symbolic of America's walls of security collapsing in God's judgment. So that, and again, in Joshua, they blew trumpets. So we have 188 months between the symbolic beginning of Trump, which was when he descended famously down the golden escalator in his Trump Tower. And towers in the Bible are used in context of judgment from God. Collapsed towers. So also the 9/11 events, right? And also the Tower of Babel story, which is what was hinted at in Genesis 11, hence why the Flight 11, which, by the way, departed from New England. On Governor's Island, Logan Airport is on Governor's Island, which is where the first governor, John Winthrop, lived. And he was the leader of the 11-ship flotilla that arrived in 1630. And before they disembarked, he delivered his famous City on a Shining Hill speech, which was derived from Deuteronomy 28, which regards the well, I just realized something. James White in the famous comeback Super Bowl, the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history for the Patriots. I didn't realize he is number 28. Wow. That's another story, but that's the 51st Super Bowl. That's because of the biggest comeback, which will be Barack Obama becoming the 51st president. And the comeback was from 25-point deficit, which is, of course, hinting at the 25th Amendment, which will be used to make him the 51st vice president. But that game was all about the, I think it was 3 touchdowns or maybe 4 touchdowns that James White scored. Anyway, so sorry about that. That was my personal going off track there. You realize these things as you go over the information. You're always discovering something new. And so Trump was 69 years old. He had just turned 69 years old, which is the same thing as being symbolically 69 years old on that day. And that's very, very prophetic because because the most central prophecy in the Bible is the 70 weeks prophecy, which is divided into a 69-week period and the 70th 7, because the weeks are sevens. The word week translated from Hebrew simply means a unit of 7. It doesn't mean like 7 days, but regardless, it's a 7. So you have a period of 69 sevens and then a 70th 7. And God uses the 69 weeks or 69 years connections here in his signs to hint at the end times, which is the 70th 7. And that's why we have this 7.0 earthquake connecting to, in Joshua tree, connecting to Trump when he turned 69 years old. It's amazing. God was really communicating with the arrival of Trump, trumpeting judgment, destruction, and the collapse of America's walls of security, in other words. Now, the symbolic beginning of Trump, God's trumpet, which hints at Joshua, was exactly 73 weeks, which hints at 3 sets of 7, before Trump won the election with 77 electoral votes. And this was the day that the leader of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, which hinted at Joshua, the leader of the Israelites, who led them in a symbolic 3 sets of 7. This was when Netanyahu had been in power for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days, on the day that Trump won by 77 electoral votes on November 8th, 2016. So 73 weeks. Okay, so that's amazing because we have more 7s here, and that's what we're talking about. It's amazing beyond words. What can I say? Now, this in turn, which way should we go? Well, let's go this way first. 73 days after this was the day that Trump was inaugurated. And on that day, he was exactly 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. In other words, another symbolic beginning of Trump and a 3 sets of 7. Furthermore, it was 73 days after he won by 77 electoral votes on the day that Netanyahu was in office for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. It is amazing beyond words. Now, this day was in turn 77 days before the 7th of the month, when Trump did his big thing when he launched the missiles into Syria. Okay? Now, he launched 59 missiles, which is the 17th prime number, but which hints at the Antichrist, as I mentioned earlier. But this is connected to the G7 summit on the 11th, just a few days later. This is how the trail works here. These signs are combined here, and that's because of the 69th Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. Okay? And so Rex Tillerson's name in gematria, which if you don't know what gematria is, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such they can be converted into a numeric value. And the name Rex Tillerson equals 171. Now, that's relevant because it hints at a combination of 1s and 7, like I had mentioned earlier, which hints at 117, Genesis 7:11, and on and on. I explained in the other video too. But also 171 is the 18th triangular number, and God uses 18 to hint at 6 plus 6 plus 6. And that is because the Antichrist, 666, will be in power during the symbolic 70th seven, which follows the 69 sevens. Hence why Rex Tillerson is the 69th. In other words, again, like I said, God uses 69 to hint at the beginning of the end times period of the Antichrist. So the 69th Secretary of State spoke at the G7 summit, which is a 7. And this was in regards to Syria. And this was the day that the nations in the G7 summit were in support of taking action against Syria. But it was a big news story. But the point is the prophetic significance of the 69th Secretary of State and G7. But it regarded Syria, and that's why it connects. And it was the sign. You'd figure there would be one at least with the 69th Secretary of State, and this is it. This is the sign that anyone who knows what I'm talking about with this prophetic significance of the 69th Secretary of State for trumpet, you're going to figure there would be a sign, and I don't know of the other one. This is it. But it makes sense because it's the G7 summit, and it comes 77 days after he was in office and all of this, right? So then we have exactly 7 times 7 times 7 weeks, which is the confirmation from the 11th, which is confirmation of what I just said about the 69th Secretary of State. And that gets us to the day that it is predicted that President Trump will die. On the date 11/7, which is also hinted at with Rex Tillerson and 171. All right? And again, it's exactly 7 times 7 times 7 weeks. On 9/11, when the 110 stories of the Twin Towers collapsed, Joshua, right, who died at 110, collapse of the walls of security, 343 firefighters died, and that is 7 times 7 times 7. In other words, this is exactly 343 weeks. And also, the second flight had a crew of 56 passengers, and 56, and the second flight is prophetic because it's the second witness. Because after the first flight hit the North Tower, the world was confused as to whether it was an act of terrorism or a bomb, an accident or a bomb or terrorism. But when the second plane hit, it was the second witness that it was in fact terrorism and therefore an act of God, which pointed to Isaiah 9:11. Okay, so by the way, I forgot to mention 188 is also a 9/11 number because the second plane had a crew of 9 and it crashed 17 minutes after the first one. And 17 divided by 9 is 1.888 into infinity. All right, so let's backtrack to the day of the 77 electoral votes and Benjamin Netanyahu being in office, symbolic of Joshua, for 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days. This day is exactly 69 months, which again, like I have said, communicates the symbolic beginning of the 70th seven with the Antichrist, to the day that the wall of security was breached. Hence the symbolism from the book of Joshua. This was the day of the breach of the FBI of Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. And the Mar-a-Lago estate is surrounded by a wall, a brick wall. And the iconic images of this event are of the FBI and their vehicles at the gate, at the wall, the entrance to the estate. They breached the wall of security, okay, because of the corruption. Now, within the government. So, but also on this same day, there was a very prophetic flooding that closed the entrances to the park of Joshua Tree National Park. Now, this is part of another sign that began in June of this year, which is 2022, when the 49 Palms Trail was closed in order to provide access to water for bighorn sheep. When the Israelites blew the trumpets, they were made of bighorn sheep horns. And the hiking trail, is symbolic of their march around the walls of security in the book of Joshua, and this trail was closed in Joshua Tree National Park. Furthermore, it was the 49 Palms Trail. 49 is 7 times 7. And that's interesting because the symbolic 3 sets of 7 in Joshua are in fact a 7 and a 7 times 7. They marched once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, it was 7 times while 7 trumpets were blown. So a 7 followed by a 7 times 7, which is what 56 passengers is if I didn't explain that fully. 56 is 7 plus 7 times 7. I don't know if I explained that well enough. So 7 days after the 49 Palms Trail was closed was the 7th of the month. And that was the day that Harris announced the big package for the border wall of security crisis. And she was also at that time at the 9th Summit of Americas, the 49th Vice President, which is right in Los Angeles, which is right near Joshua Tree National Park, where 49 Palm Trail was closed. Okay. So then in turn, from the Mar-a-Lago sign of judgment, you could say, because it's evil, the breach of security, right? Because the FBI, in this case, the government is evil. It's a coup. It's a renegade government. It's no longer a democracy, right? It's no longer. I want to use my words carefully here. It's no longer a representative people-run institution. Let's put it that way. Okay. Okay. So then from this date, it is 119% of a year to the date it is predicted that the walls of security collapse when Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to the rise of the Antichrist. 119 hints at 9/11. It is also 7 times 17. But it is also the equivalent of 10,440 hours, which hints at 144, a prominent prophetic number in the book of Revelation regarding the rescue and evacuation of God's faithful from the Antichrist. Okay, but also this day, this Mar-a-Lago wall date, the breach of security of the wall of security of trumpet, was exactly 1,091 weeks after 9/11. And that is amazing because this hints at, of course, 9/11, which means this is a big judgment warning sign, the breaching of the wall of security of Trump's estate. Trumpet's estate. Because again, the walls of security collapsed when trumpets were blown in the book of Joshua. Okay, and then again, we had the flooding in the Joshua Tree National Park on this day too, which is the relief after the dry period for the bighorn sheep. All right. So, this day here, the 69th Secretary of State at the G7 summit was exactly 7 plus 7 years, 7 plus 7 plus 7 years, 3 sets of 7 years after this date, which was when Comet Hyakutake passed by the star named Algol, which is known in ancient astronomy as the demon star. But what is amazing, though, about this and why it is a prophetic sign is that exactly a year later, on April 11th, 1997, Comet Hale-Bopp passed over the same Algol star on the same date. And the two paths of these comets over the star are perpendicular to each other, which engenders a cross. And that's because God is communicating with this and other signs that the date that Jesus was crucified on was April 11th. And and of course it's the demon star, and Jesus, with his death on the cross, paid the ransom owed for our sin. But he defeated the power over us that Satan has, which is death, through his resurrection. And now if we choose, we can follow him out of captivity because the ransom has been paid. And if we choose to have Christ, and we choose to repent and be baptized in the Holy Spirit, we can also follow Jesus out of captivity and have eternal life. Okay, so that's amazing because, and again, this 3 sets of 7 connects to this 7, the G7, and the 69th Secretary of State. But also, what's a confirmation of it is that 7 plus 7 plus 7 years, 21 years, is the equivalent of 252 months, which hints at the 70th 7 in the prophecy, which is a period of 7 years, which is 2,520 days, 7 biblical years, which is what is hinted at with 252 months, the 70th 7. And we have this 3 sets of 7 connection to the G7 and Rex Tillerson, the 69th Secretary of State. Okay. I think this diagram is now completely explained. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.